Hi, I'm Valerie Engelhart. In this video, I am going to be painting a bit of fan art from the game Portal 2, and this is Glados the potato. Now, obviously at this point, no spoilers because this game has been out for a long time, but if you don't want to hear any spoilers for the game Portal 2, go ahead and move away now. Alright, if you're still here, I assume that you either want to hear about how much I love the Portal series, or you want to see how I painted this, or both. So it is getting close to SGDQ season, and I love to submit art to be used in the charity incentives. And at this point that I'm painting this, the games list hasn't come out yet, so I'm getting started because I don't know how busy I'm going to get with a game that is very well known and has a high likelihood of being shown in some capacity. Now, if it's not, I can just hold on to it until a future event where a Portal game is shown. But let's get into technique. I am painting on a 9x12 block of Arches cold press watercolor paper, and I started the painting with some Amethyst Genuine. I love Amethyst Genuine for shadows, and it's kind of like my black color substitute. I don't use black typically straight from the tube, although if you've been watching some lately videos, that's kind of been changing a bit. But on these more colorful paintings, I do like to do a purple for shadows. I did pop in a little yellow there because in the middle of this computer piece is a light, and Glados's is yellow. Now, in this part of the game, she has been put into a potato, and it is fantastic. I love it every time I see it, and because it makes me so happy, I thought, I want to make other people happy too. Let's paint Glados the potato. Right now, I am going into, this is M. Graham paint, and it's quinacridone rust. I don't know if you can see, but that piece of paper on the side where I've squeezed fresh pigment, there's this like little blobby bit that looks like a mini painting, and that was me testing my composition and my colors to see if I liked what I was about to use. And I did. So that's why I'm painting this. I'm going in pretty strong, putting in lines, and then bleeding those lines away, just using clean water. The brush I am currently using is a size 12 Princeton Neptune round brush. But right now, I am just going in and trying to make a potato shape. And I don't want it to just be one hard lump of a color, so I am using a lot of water to give myself some variation, to bleed things away, to hopefully get some watercolor blooms. And I'm going in now with some, this is Winsor & Newton's raw umber. I like the granulating properties, and it has quite the potato look to it. I am not a brand purist, so in this particular painting, I am pulling out like every different brand of watercolor manufacturer that I have. That's not entirely true, but it's getting pretty close. So while this painting, or this potato, both are wet, the potato is in play, and so I am playing around. I want to make sure not to lose my light, but potatoes are dimpled and dappled, and so I'm putting in like drops of paint here and there to suggest those pitted sections. If you look where the computer part of my potato is, some of that yellow has bled into the purple, and some of the rust has bled in as well. And I love that. I love having these lost and found edges. I love how the watercolor plays with all of its different pigments merging together, and as long as I don't force it, I can get some beautiful gradations and fusions. Now I am bleeding some of the color away. I don't want this potato just being a hard lined potato. So in a few sections, I am trying to get some lost and found edges, trying to bleed some of that color into the background to give me an atmospheric effect. That's right, I am bringing my fine art skills into a video game potato painting. I'm going in now with that Amethyst Genuine because I want to deepen my shadows. If you want a nice, convincing painting of anything really, pay attention to your values, your lights and your darks. So some of the pieces of the potato I want to keep light. Some, if it's turning away from the light source, make it nice and dark. And I don't know if I've mentioned this yet, but Amethyst Genuine is such a beautiful color in that it sparkles. So not only is this a glorious potato, but it is going to be a fabulous potato. So glittery. I've pulled out a toothbrush and I'm going to pick up that Amethyst Genuine and I'm going to spritz some of that purple into my potato because, I mean, have you seen a potato? They are usually kind of dirty looking and they've got lots of little dots and pits. And so I thought, let's just try spattering a bit and see what happens. And I love it. Just don't overdo it. Otherwise, you lose the effect. And that's one thing I think in all mediums, but I do know particularly in watercolor, it can be so fun to do certain effects, but you don't want to overdo it because if your emphasis is everywhere, then it's nowhere. If everything's important, then nothing's important. Now, I was getting too much paint seeping into that computer portion, so I just grabbed my paper towel and pressed on the paper and lifted the paint off. Luckily, because all of that was still wet, it was very easy to do. Now, the quinacridone colors do stain, but that's great because now I still have some of that light color. I don't have to go paint it back in, but I did remove some of it so that there is some separation from the computer portion to my potato portion. Now, one thing I do love about this game in particular is it is a physics puzzle game. I have a lot of trouble playing video games, especially combat ones. And while this game does require that I move around quite a bit, it is one of the few that I can play. And so that always makes me very excited. Right now, I'm using my brush just to lift some of the paint off of the side of the potato. That is because even though I do have that main computer portion painted, that is the focal point and therefore the most important part, she has other like wires and doodads coming off of that center piece. And that required me to lift some of the paint. And now I'm lifting where some wires are going to be later. And I want to do this while it's still wet. But at this point, the painting is damp. If the painting were still very wet, the moment that I introduced that water, whatever paint was around it would just seep right in. And so I wouldn't really get the lift effect. What I'd probably get is like a cauliflower or a bloom. And that's not what I want. I want to remove that excess pigment. So I used a synthetic small size 3 round brush to lift off some lines to map out where I'm going to put some of those wires later. Now I've let dear Glados dry, and I let her dry naturally, so we can see some lovely watercolor blooms have formed, but we also see that the painting is a lot paler than when I had left it. That is because watercolor dries much paler, and depending on the pigment and intensity, it can be 50% paler. So I have grabbed a tiny flat brush because I'm going to be painting in some of those computer portions, and they are quite angular. So for angular things, or man-made things, I like to use a flat brush to at least put in the shapes. Then I go in with my round brush and soften those areas, bleed it in with the surrounding space, because I do still want it to be cohesive. To have a lovely loose potato and then just these big hard lines out of nowhere doesn't really work for me. I do want some hard lines, but I still want it to have the same vibe as the overall painting. But gosh, if you have not played this game, go play it. And if you are someone who is kind of like me and is either too busy to play video games or has a lot of trouble playing them, for whatever reason, no judgment, because I'm really bad at them. I'm so bad. But there are plenty of Let's Plays on YouTube. You can watch someone play the game. The story is so much fun. The puzzles are fun. I love the turrets. I love the rogue AI or bot, whatever that is. I forgot what they're called, but you've got Wheatley, the core, and he's kind of the bad guy in this game. It's just such a good game. Oh, I love it so much. All right, I put some dark wires in. Because those wires are darker than the surrounding area, earlier I didn't need to lift off any pigment because the paint I was going to be putting on was darker than the surroundings, so I don't need to worry about lifting. However, after I did paint in those wires, I did soften the end of them to make it look like it was going into the potato. And then I put in dots of the rust to just have it fuse in a little more naturally. It feels weird to say naturally whenever I'm dealing with a computer potato, but it's an effect. I'm going for an effect. Now I'm just painting some more lines around that computer portion to give it more of a 3D effect, have it pop out, and doing some dry brushing because, well, poor Glados has been put in a bird's nest at one point. She's a little dirty. And stay tuned, because I do have another painting on the way in a very different style, but featuring our dear darling Glados in her feared bird's nest. Again, just go experience the game somehow. It's fantastic. All right, I've picked up some of my cadmium yellow and I'm painting where those wires on the side are going to be, where I lifted that paint earlier. And while it's okay, I'm not getting the pop that I was hoping to get. So I'm just gonna leave that alone for now. And I'm gonna go back in later and mix my paint with some gouache so that it's opaque and stands out a bit better. All right, I'm going in nice and bold now because Glados has some wires that come off of her unit and kind of just float freely in space. So I need to be confident in my brush strokes. And there is no such thing as a mistake at this point. I just have to go with the flow. And just be mindful of where I put things. Doing some more wires coming out of the top now. Just little angular, almost check mark looking shapes. But even now, if you look closely, there are some parts of that like circular computer portion that don't have a hard line separating it from the fleshy potato portion. And yet, unless you're looking for it, it's not necessarily noticeable. And those sort of things are great because as we look at a painting as a whole, sometimes we see things that we're like, oh, I really like how they did that, even if I can't quite describe it. It's those little things that sometimes people will say where they like a certain style or the way you did something, even if they can't fully articulate exactly what that thing is. And in my case, it's little bits of lost and found, where there's a definite edge of something and one where it technically doesn't exist, but I've given the information that our brain fills it in and it does exist. I guess we've got Schrodinger's potato. Guess that's far more ethical than the cat. All right, I painted in some, I don't know if those are screws or nails or whatever that are coming out the back, but because that is towards the back of the potato, it is not my focal point. I did use water to bleed some of it away. I do want it to be clear that there are these little metallic things back there, but they're not so important that they need to have all hard edges, all straight lines. I do like to break up straight lines with little dashed portions, and it's better if they're not all the same length. I'm going in now with some dry brushing of that rust color to give a little more form and texture to my potato. Giving a little more form to the back. And I've noticed there's this like curved wire piece that's holding another piece of computer wire in, so I'm painting that in. And I want to keep colors cohesive throughout the piece, so that same cadmium yellow I used in the center, I'm going to use it in those, I don't know, they kind of look like electrical caps. And then using the purple to create shadow. But for example, in the original piece, I think that yellow that I'm painting right now is actually like a cerulean blue, but I don't want to introduce a new color at this point. And it is not absolutely vital to this character's essence that a certain cap be colored blue. Anyone who is familiar with the game will see what this is and be like, oh, that's Glados the potato. And anyone unfamiliar will probably be confused, regardless of whether or not that was blue or yellow. So you don't always have to paint something exactly the way you see it. Pull out that artistic license, change something up if it makes sense for the painting, and try to keep those colors cohesive adding a blue in at that point, especially towards the back, would call attention back there, and that's not where I need the attention. Sure, it's important for the composition, but that would take attention away from the main circular computer bit at the bottom, which is not what I want to do. And then the way to fix that is I'd have to start adding blue everywhere else. And if you start introducing a new color at the late stage of your painting, it's not impossible, but it can complicate things. And sometimes adding more actually detracts from the work. Right, I just used my brush to soften some of that cadmium yellow that was in the center to lift off a small highlight. And then popping in a little quinacridone gold to just give a little more visual interest to that area, since that is the focal point. All right, it is gouache time. I've pulled out my Da Vinci titanium white gouache, and I always squeeze that out fresh because trying to reconstitute dry gouache, you lose some of that opacity. And in this case, I want full, juicy opacity. So I'm grabbing my cadmium yellow and I'm mixing it on my paper, my scrap piece of paper, with that gouache. And now I'm going in and painting those yellow wires that I tried painting earlier, but the yellow was getting lost. Notice how with it mixed with the white gouache, it really separates itself far better than it did before. It is far more noticeable. Now, because I do have that there, I do want to go and put little bits in other parts of my painting for the purpose of cohesion. And at this point, it's just doing the little things, little details, deepening a shadow here and there. And here's the finished painting. If you liked this video, press that like button so I know to make more like it. And if you want to see more, subscribe because I post videos every Monday and Thursday. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye.